Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and we will discuss about the technologies. And yes, we have debate, but it's an open debate. It's open dialogues. Today's topic is: does technology make socializing easier or harder? We have our world famous speaker, Professor Fred Philip. He's a president of Tando. I believe our audience know about Tando as well. And we have our famous speaker, Professor David Smith. First, I would like to give chance, Professor Fred Philip.
Thank you, Sharif. I'm having a little technical problem here, but you can hear me, right? Can you hear me? There we are. Yeah, okay. I think we need to break the topic into personal communication and mass communication, but most socializing is personal communication. And I have to say that for me, it's made socializing much, much more easy over the years. One big reason is I've lived in several countries, and I enjoy staying in touch with the friends that I've made in those countries, and I profit from staying in touch with the professional colleagues in those countries. And it is a big step forward from paying huge long distance telephone tolls and for trying to scribble on email flimsies. Things are much, much easier these days. But the answer overall about whether technology makes socializing easier or harder depends on a few things. It depends on the life cycle stage of the communication technology. It depends on what we might call communication norms, which are how people feel about the social merit of using one particular communication channel or another. It has to do with the number of available channels, and it has to do with the reliability and cost of those channels. So let me give some examples and clarifications on each of those. In my dining room, I have a poster. It's an attractive color poster issued by the U.S. Post Office in, I think, the 1920s or about 1930. And it has a woman, clearly upper class for the time, sitting at her desk, writing a letter with a fountain pen, of course. And she's thinking about how to send that letter. And the caption that the post office provides is email, no, it's not email, pardon me, airmail. Airmail is socially correct. All right. So this woman and the post office determined that people of her class and her time might think that an airmail message is too pushy and might insult the recipient. But the post office is assuring her that airmail is socially correct. So this has to do with the establishment of communication norms. There was a time when the telephone was new that people would agonize over whether to send a telegram or make a phone call, right? Because a phone call might disturb the tranquility of the recipient's household, and they're afraid that it would be insulting to insult the to disturb your interlocutor's tranquility for a message that might not be perceived as sufficiently important or urgent. Okay, but of course we got over that, and people rarely use telegrams these days, and would make a phone call whenever they wish to at the drop of a hat. Now we have a similar comparison where people hesitate to make a phone call because they know that the person at the other end of the line is extremely busy, and so it's not a matter of disturbing the tranquility of someone who's not tranquil in the first place. It's a matter of disturbing the time of someone who might be very, very busy. So instead of making the phone call, we send a text message. So this is how the channels evolve and how our norms concerning using the channels evolve also. I have to say that when my father was first introduced to email, he would use the language of telegrams because he grew up in the age of telegrams, and he would write sentences in his emails that were extremely economical in words. And at the end of a sentence, he would write STOP, just as people would do when they sent a telegram. Eventually, he got over that. This is what we call technology colonization. When the usage mechanism of an old technology colonizes your brain and affects the way that you use a new technology. It's a very interesting phenomenon, and sometimes it uh, retards the effective take up of a new technology. So now we have a number of channels that we communicate on, and sometimes it's too much and too many channels, and this can make socializing harder because I know that I need to reply to Sharif in Sharif's last message, but then I think, was Sharif's last message on email? And if it was on email, which of my email addresses did he contact me on? And if it was on text, was it on WhatsApp or was it on? Well, you see where I'm going with this. The the huge number of available channels can make socializing harder because you can't remember what channel it was. Now about cost and reliability. Back in the 1970s, the famous science fiction writer who also invented the communications satellite, uh, and that invention is central to today's conversation, Arthur C. Clarke. He predicted in the 70s that by the turn of the century, long distance phone charges would disappear. And he was absolutely right. Now, with Skype or WhatsApp, you can call anyone in the world basically for free. And well, cost and reliability have some other aspects that I'll close my initial remarks with. Um, right now there's in industry the start of a general disenchantment with cloud computing. And at the personal level, why should I be disenchanted with cloud computing? One is I used to have an online address book that was offered for free by a certain company. That company was acquired by another company that discontinued that service. So all my contacts up in smoke because I was keeping my contact list on the cloud. Um, I use Kakao Talk to stay in touch with friends in Korea. Another service called Line that's popular with people in Taiwan and my friends there, and of course WeChat in China. And when I lived in each of those countries, I had a local SIM card, a local telephone number. Okay, I've moved back to the United States. I've been in the States for 4 years now. And in each of those telephone companies, they've now given my telephone number to someone else. And because Kakao and Line and WeChat are all based on your telephone number, suddenly all my contacts on WeChat are gone. So, yeah, this is a way that quote advanced technology unquote makes the socializing harder because I had to use other channels to try to reestablish those Kakao and WeChat contacts, and I was maybe 70% successful at that, and some contacts are gone forever. Um, so we've been talking about voice and text. Of course, now we have things like emojis and we have video chat. And one thing that can make socializing harder is that when you make an abbreviated response to someone's Facebook um, posting, or when you send a tweet, Your message is so condensed that it's easily misunderstood, especially in a cross-cultural context. And you can say something that you intend to be warm and sincere, and somebody else takes it as insulting. The emojis actually help. I think they can be used to soften what you send or to indicate your mood. And this can help make a message more reliable, not just reliable in the sense of transmission, but in the sense of the recipient understands your intention when you sent the message. On the other hand, um, there are a number of people who have said that the Tondo website really needs to have more video content. I say, why? We need clients who can read. And that stops them for a moment. And they say, yeah, but especially the younger generation, they all like video content very much. And I say, if people can't read, Tondo can't really help them. So this remains a kind of an open question. And with that, I will close. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Philip, for your excellent analysis. Professor David Smith.
I echo much of what Fred has said, but one of the things to me as I begin to look at social media and how we begin to use this type of technology is it brings me back to something I've spoken a lot on, and that is the concept of multi-generations in the workforce. Well, if I take this type of communications like Fred was talking about and we're talking about today and apply it to generations, we see very big gaps in different ways that we can use it in places where it maybe should not be used as much. You know, there's many studies that show that the use of certain types of technologies like this by children and early teens can diminish their communication and socialization skills, particularly because they tend to avoid face-to-face conversation. And those are so necessary for us to be successful in parts of our life. I can tell you recently, uh, by my using electronic communications to begin to discuss uh, some issues with a very close friend, I really come to the real realization that oftentimes words are wrong to use when communicating with people sometimes. They don't feel the emotion, they're easy to misinterpret, and other things like that. So if we're looking at does technology make socialization easier or harder, which is the question for today, I think the answer is resoundingly yes. Technology does make socializing easier. But on the other hand, it makes it a lot harder as well. I mean, if I look through my LinkedIn accounts, my Instagram accounts, my Snapchat accounts, my Facebook account, my Bottom accounts, my all the other ones that WhatsApp and all those together, yeah, I have about 20,000, 25,000 different connections on those. Now, do I socialize with all 20,000 of those? No. But I have the ability to go and work and communicate with them. And I love watching some of their posts. I have people every week compliment me on one or two of the posts I've done as well during the week. And so, does that help me set up a relationship? Yes. But does that make them friends? No. It helps us put those elements in place, though. And as Fred mentioned earlier, it's really easy to separate the difference between a business application of communicating with technology versus social and interpersonal uses of technology to communicate and socialize. And they're very different. If I go and put on my business hat with technology and socialization, it's easy to confuse what is an official communication as part of work and what is just plain socializing. because as we begin to look at the words we're using, the tone, and particularly when we take into account generations, because if I look at Z generation, and if I look at millennials, even up to the greatest generation, and baby boomers like I am, we all communicate differently. And our use of words are differently, particularly as you look at millennials and Z Gen. Um, and so we have to understand it. You know, Fred's comment about more video on the website. Well, if I today, and I've resisted this, many of my young friends use TikTok all the time to communicate. I'm not quite there yet. And I'm not quite there yet, not just for the media, but for my security concerns with it. And you see those gone. The same way with text. If I am texting on my phone, I'm more tempted to text to people who has an Apple phone where I can use iMessenger as part of the text where everything's encrypted than I am to text to somebody on an Android phone where the message is unencrypted. And you see that as you look at these impacts on socialization. Uh, in communicating with some of my other friends' kids, God, we've carried on entire conversations using pictures. And I don't think we ever used a word in that whole exchanged icons back and pictures back and forth. So you can see that as a different way. Now, as Fred mentioned earlier, what technology has done is it's made it much easier for me to have friends globally. I mean, Dr. Sharif, you're an example of this here. I mean, we not only interact with this, we not only interact by text, but we interact by voice and stuff through the social media. And that has made it so much easier. Um, we also see places where we have to adapt technologies to the different areas. Fred mentioned one. I had to install another socialization app on my phone called Bottom because in the UAE part of the world, that whole area there, they do not like some of the Western technologies. So when I'm communicating with friends there, I have to go to Bottom, and on Bottom, all the communications is kept in the Middle East there. And you have to adapt your channels, as Fred was talking about earlier, because the technology around socialization is very much driven by a variety of channels. And I know people who only use one or two of the channels. I use probably 10 or 11 different channels for socialization on here. And it's also driven by the type of messages I'm trying to communicate. Um, I'm still a person if I'm delivering a very important message or if I'm delivering a very sad message. I'd rather use that by voice because you can hear the differences in what I'm doing. I hate getting messages in the technology all caps because to me it sounds like people are yelling at me, and who knows, they might be. But those are some of the challenges as we look at how we perceive, how we look at the
I think we
demographic,
need to break the.
how we look at the different elements of it. That's kind of my first response. And it looks like, there we go. Sharif, that's my first response.
Thank you. Now I request Professor Donald. Mr. Donald, can you unmute, please?
There we go. Um, well, I appreciate what everybody said. I think I don't see. I'm getting a weird feedback thing. Oops.
Donald, I was getting that as well.
Now my video just went away. Well, um, hang on just one second. I usually can get it back by unplugging it and plugging it back in, so I'm going to do that. Okay. Now, it was interesting to hear what everybody said, and the thing that I think is that I wanted to start with is what we mean by socializing, and um, to me, socializing is like when you invite somebody over to your house and you sit around and talk, but sometimes you socialize on the phone, and I mean before the internet, and like what was socializing like and what was its purpose? I mean, we talk about the difference between work and regular socializing, but every place I've worked, people go into the coffee room, they have lunch together, they do all kinds of things together, and they mix their conversations. If you think of having a conversation with somebody, it's usually you don't stay on the same subject. Usually what winds up happening is you switch from subject to subject to subject, and it's kind of a free flowing interaction. Certainly in a business context, you want to make that more organized. If you're doing a meeting or something like that, that's why people use PowerPoint. But in many, many, many business meetings, it's sadly not anywhere near as organized as we wish, and they go on forever with many pointless things in them. So that can happen as well. So kind of drawing the idea of what I mean or what I'm thinking of when I'm thinking of socializing, I think it's a mixed bag. I wonder, I mean, in my own view of what socializing is, I think you might think of like Twitter. I socialize in quotes on Twitter, but I have 13,000 followers. So I'm not socializing with everybody. What winds up happening is there's a certain group of people that follow me very closely and respond to literally everything I say. And that group of people, I sort of feel like they're almost my friends. And I really enjoy socializing. I enjoy, but I've never seen them in person, and I actually don't really want to, because if you put out information about yourself, I put out a lot of political stuff, and the Trump people will actually come to your house and beat you up and stuff like that. I mean, they're not nice people. And so you've got to, and it happens a lot. So you have to be really careful to not. So I have, my account is actually in a very close to my name, but I don't use my real name. And so anyway, it can be dangerous. And which is interesting, because you think of socializing and people, I just block them, but there's people gang up on you on social media to attack you. And so on Twitter, what'll happen is if they don't like you, they put you on lists. I keep checking to make sure I'm not on lists, because they'll put you on lists, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them will report you for some sort of made up violation. And then what happens is the algorithms that check for that will go, uh-oh, danger, danger, Will Robinson, and they'll turn off they'll suspend your account. And I know many people who've gotten their accounts suspended just because they get ganged up on by the MAGA. And so that's a very interesting aspect of it. It's not it's not really socializing like in the way you would normally socialize, because usually you don't have like large groups of people attacking you, calling you names, threatening to kill you and stuff like that. Um, that's a little less common in regular social life. But, and plus, they're just imaginary people. You don't really know what they're actually really like. They create a persona. So you're interacting. So you're sort of socializing. And it's similar with Facebook. In Facebook, I have always kept my, I've kept my regular name and stuff like that. And I haven't been on it as much lately, but I have about, well, you max out at 5,000 followers. So I maxed out, but then if I'm not on it, I lose a few followers, but I have about, so it's the same thing. There's a small group of people that I interact with. So it makes it easier, but I think I met Sharif through Facebook, right? You found me on Facebook in the first place, right? Yeah, yeah. So that was when I was really posting a lot of stuff, and I tend to post stuff from journals and kind of more more on the academic end, which is what why Sharif was interested, and so it can lead to socializing. And I looked up, I went through Google Scholar trying to find studies and research on socializing and social media and things like that, and there aren't as many as I'd like. It turns out it's kind of a difficult thing to research, because the definition of socializing, of course, is it's all over the map. It's hard to know exactly what that means, and everything's self-reported, so it's very difficult to come to very solid conclusions. But there are some things where kids that are on Facebook wind up getting depressed and not feeling good. And it's partially because they compare themselves to other people who have these perfect lives, which is probably just bullshit. They're just, created this identity that has a perfect life. And then also the bullying, the huge amount of bullying that goes on social media. So as far as the technical part of it, it can get a little confusing, but I figure it out. I mean, I use WhatsApp a lot because I'm doing a bunch of stuff with people in Africa, and we message. And actually, somebody called me from where was she? Not Mozambique. Anyway, yesterday, and we talked for a while, and Tanzania, and that's nice. I get to socialize with people I wouldn't otherwise, and I've met a lot of neat people on Zoom. I've met you guys, and this is sort of socializing in a way. And I'm really glad to meet you guys. So through Zoom, I've met a lot of people, but Zoom isn't really social media. Exactly. And last, I want to say that I really love the way video social media has evolved, because originally it was just the software to record yourself was very expensive. I mean, you could get cheap software, but it was unusable. And so if you wanted to get decent software to make a movie and edit a movie, it was, you're spending $300 or $400. And if you're just a, kid, that's a big hit. So the way that they've organized the video capabilities of of TikTok are amazing. And some of the ways that people have learned to use it just blow my mind. I mean, in 3 minutes, people can do more just incredible stuff. They can just tell a story with absolute punch. I mean, everything about it. The background videos. A common thing that they do and is that they'll talk about an article, and then they'll put the article up as the background, and then they'll duck their heads so you can read the article, and then they'll pop back up, things like that. It's great. And I've made a few TikToks, and I plan to do it more in the future, but I just feel those people, in that circumstance, I really do feel more like I'm socializing, because you get to see their expressions and their facial, their body language. And you don't make the mistake that my colleagues were talking about getting misinterpreted because of the words you use. There's an internet law called Poe's Law, P-O-E, Poe's Law, and it says there's nothing that you can say that's so outrageous that somebody won't assume that you're serious. So, in other words, sarcasm does not work on the internet, because there's nothing that you can say sarcastically that's so outrageous that someone won't believe that you're saying it seriously. So that's Poe's Law. And so we all encounter that. But with facial expressions and things on TikTok, you don't run into that nearly so much. But I really like TikTok. And so you can socialize more in some ways and less in others. And I think that TikTok is kind of advancing that ability. So we'll have to see. It's all still developing.
Thank you, Mr. Donald. Now I request for closing remarks, and if you want to add some argument and analysis for this topic, first Professor David Smith, because I think he has an appointment. Can you unmute, please?
Normally, I'm good with that. Sharif, thank you so much for this. I have a little bit of time, but thank you for letting me talk about how technology impacts our socialization, and also kind of how it impacts the other things we are doing. There's a recent study out that says almost 75% of the electronic socialization through the various platforms is done in a mobile environment. And I know when I'm on social media, on my notebook versus on my iPhone, I communicate differently. I tend to write more on my notebook. I'm shorter. I might send 5 messages. That would be one message if I'm preparing it on my notebook. So we see we actually adapt the way we communicate with the different technologies we're using, for the different type of platforms we're using. With artificial intelligence now being used more and more with the technologies that we use for socialization, we're going to see more and more of that coming in there too. So for example, on a couple of my social media platforms, if you add me into yours, or if you follow me, my chat box is going to give you a response. Is that me? No. But you're going to believe that I immediately came back and thanked you for following me. For example, in my Twitter feed, like Donald talks about, in my chat box will immediately give them some positive feedback. And is that part of socialization? Well, I think it is. It's computer enhanced socialization. Now, does that count with the sociologist definition? Definitely not. But today, in our time of the different ways we have to communicate, it is so different. And it's actually blowing, it's taking the line between what we do human to human and what we do electronically aided, and it's blurring that line. And I haven't come to the conclusion yet whether that's good or bad. My gut level tells me it's bad. But technology, on the other hand, has helped me communicate with vast amount of people. It's helped me keep in touch. Um, I've recently had people from around the world reach out to me uh, and ask, "Is everything okay? How are you doing?" Other things like that, because in some of the social media, they sense I was going through a hard time, and that to me is really encouraging because I have friends I've met around the world who we're scheduling times, we're getting together, we're catching up, we're telling stories. And telling stories has changed as we've used technology as part of our socialization process too. I love the ones where I can use pictures. I love the ones where I can use more advanced. Uh, Pure text, like what we can do in the chat here in SteamYard, frustrates me very often because I would love to put an image into it. But that changes again how we socialize and how we put those pieces together. I'm going to go back one more time to the topic for today. Does technology make socialization easier or harder? And my answer was flippant at first. It said yes. But I'll tell you, after the discussions we've had, after actually taking time, much like Donald does when he goes out and does some searches, I did as well on this and looked at studies. And the studies are almost 50-50. Technology diminishes some of our interpersonal relationships, but it broadens the socialization relationships we have with others. So, is it good? Is it bad? Is it easier or harder? It's just different, and that's kind of what we need to remember is we were taught in some of our communication classes and some of our psychology classes and some of our business classes to always choose the right medium or to always choose the right channel to communicate. And that is so true as we look at using the various forms of technology to socialize today. And Sharif, that's my closing remark.
Thank you. Professor Fred Philip. Professor Fred.
Yes, I'm unmuting. Okay, now I've unmuted. I really appreciate David's remarks and Donald's. Um, I think we've really done a lot today to clarify the subject. Um, David was introducing a new definition of socializing that he said was probably not the sociologist's definition. I am guessing that the sociologist's definition would be that socializing means strengthening personal relationships and reinforcing the prevailing social structure. Um, Here, with these new media, we are also we are doing that, but we're also creating new social structures that span international boundaries and span the distance between physical space and cyberspace. I think this is overlaps, if not identical, to what David was saying. Now, a lot of the conversation has drifted into the world of social media, and before people can socialize, they have to be socialized. So the socialization process for young people is learning what the social structure is and learning the value of interacting with other people. And I think all of us have read a lot of um, news items, blogs, studies, and so forth saying that the social media inhibit the socialization of young people for the main reason that they have their heads buried in the phone all the time and don't know how to have a face-to-face conversation with another person. So, in that sense, the technology makes socializing harder because a generation of people are rising who are not socialized sufficiently. Um, here we are on Zoom. On StreamYard. We've had a couple of technical glitches, but it's nothing compared to the reliability problems that exist through other channels, more traditional channels. UPS delivery I've found to be highly unreliable lately. I bought some wine online, and UPS consistently lies about when they're going to deliver it. Not very reliable. If we think back farther to possibly ridiculous examples like stuffing a note into a bottle and corking it and throwing it into the ocean, or in Victorian times, you'd give a coin to a street kid and say, deliver this message to such and such an address. And you hope that the street kid delivers it in the hope of getting still another coin on the other end of the. This is all from, Dickensian literature, but you think sometimes the kid might take the money and run. So, over the historical timeline, the communication, the possibility of socialization is far, far more easy than it has been in the past. Okay, so more about StreamYard and Zoom. When I was in middle school, I think, of course, I didn't drive. My mother took me to the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. There was a primitive video phone set up where you could communicate by video and sound with a person at the other end of the museum. And my mother said, "This will never fly." Why? I said. She says, "I like to talk on the phone, but I don't want to have to put on my makeup and fix my hair every time I take a phone call." And okay, so here we are 50 years later, more than 50 years later. And we have, okay, I combed my hair before I logged in, okay, but that took me maximum 15 seconds. But it takes longer for the ladies, and most of our panel members on Sharif's show have been men rather than women. So I think women are still a little bit reluctant to engage in video communication. So this is about the life cycle and the maturation of this kind of channel. And we'll see how it continues to evolve. Death threats and physical dangers. Donald, you touched on those. I'm retired from university, but I still engage in academic research. And the research scene is getting much more fraught, because if you're doing research on climate change, on the electoral process, on pandemic precautions, you're more likely in the future to experience very vehement opposition, sometimes with the threat of violence. And this is usually via social media until, as you said, Donald, the guy shows up at your door with a club, a knife, or a gun. So I speak at conferences, and I tell researchers, somewhat to their surprise and consternation, that hey, you have to be more careful these days. And so that makes. These are colleagues, and we like to consider them friends, so it's socializing as well as business. And we have to consider the dangers that make that kind of interaction harder because of social technology. Thanks for letting me express these thoughts.
Thank you, Professor Fred Philip. Now I request Mr. Donald.
I'm glad Fred expanded on my point about that, because it's interesting. On TikTok, you'll find these creators, like there's this woman who she's a doctor also with a PhD in immunology, and she mentioned once that she was at John Hopkins giving a talk to a room full of people. Many of them had Nobel Prizes. I mean, she's the real thing. She does this nice show on what she thinks about pandemic, monkeypox, the latest things like that, explains it. It's just great. And she gets death threats all the time. I mean, people, and so what people do on TikTok now when they're doing a live show is they don't do it unless they have a couple of people at least that just do nothing but interact with the trolls, because it's just so overwhelming how many people will attack people on TikTok. So that's not exactly socializing that I'm familiar with. Um, one thing I think is a very, very negative aspect of social media is that it has algorithms that guide you to people that are like you, as defined by the artificial intelligence, by the deep learning programs that they use to guide. And a lot of that is just it's just induction. It doesn't have any knowledge to it. It just says that because a person who clicked on these things or talked to these people, then therefore they're going to want to talk to this certain kind of people. So again, on TikTok, people will come on sometimes and they'll say, I don't know what happened, but I'm on the wrong side of TikTok. And what that means is there's parts of TikTok that are just nothing but people who are getting together trying to talk about how awful America is, and how it's been taken over by liberals and they want to kill them all and blah blah blah. And if somebody actually interacts with somebody like that, the algorithm will make the mistake of thinking that they actually like people like that, and all of a sudden all their TikToks will be from people like that. So then they post out, they say, please, and if you're left wing or if you're educated, please interact with me. So that gets the algorithm to put them back on the right side of TikTok. And the reason I think that's a little, when I go to visit a different country, one of the things I always do is go to a couple of pubs, just because I'm going to meet random people that are, random people. And I socialize with them. I sit around and I talk to them and I find out what their lives are like. And when you're talking to somebody, you can have the best kind of conversations if you listen a lot. And so it's really nice to go to a place like, when I go to conferences, academic conferences, I like to go down to the hotel bar and talk with people, because at academic conferences you give papers that have been carefully written, so there's no speculation. Everything is absolutely 100%, verified. Yeah, 100% verified. It's been reviewed by other academics in your field, and I mean, it's straight ahead. But you get a couple of beers in them and they'll tell you why they're doing it and what they believe is actually going to happen in their field and all these exciting things. So I learn way more socializing at a conference than I do going to the presentations. I mean, they put the papers in a binder. I could read them after the conference. So that's an aspect of socializing I don't think we get. It's harder to get. And in fact, it's not just harder to get by the nature of the medium. It's also because the algorithms deliberately put you together with people that are like you, so you can't learn from them because they all know that they're like you. They read the same things, they watch the same movies, and all of that. So I think that's one way that it is kind of negative for socializing. but now I have all these friends in Africa. I'm planning to, I think, take a trip to Kenya in November, and I have two friends in Kenya. One of them's going to pick me up at the airport and let me stay at his house, and the other one's going to introduce me to his friends and family. And so I've got, this huge network of people in Nairobi that are just really, really happy I'm going to come and see them. And uh, I've only interacted with them on the web. I mean, on the various internet things, WhatsApp and Zoom and so on like that. So anyway, well, no, I knew them before. Actually, I've known them as people, but ever since, that's for years. That's all I've been able to interact with them as. So it's got its pluses and its minuses, and I agree with Fred. What Fred said, it's evolving, and we're gonna see a lot of new stuff happening. I mean, people evolve too, as David said, and I think that w- because of those things, um, we do see new social structures, like David said. I mean, there's new hierarchies, um, people that are um, creators and influencers and things like that are kind of a different way of being a top dog than you ever were before. So it, it's 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 a wonderful thing. I'm really glad we have it, but it has its downsides.
Hey, Donald, I learned a new word today, and it was actually a word that I learned while doing some research on water consumption over there in Utah and other places. But they were talking about people that were apparently flocking to an area because it's very scenic and all of that, and it's impacting the water and the economy. But the new word that I learned was Instagrammable, because apparently it's something that is able to actually be influenced that you can put on Instagram. So therefore, it's one of those cases of social media and all of that, because they're saying that you want to be, I guess, Instagrammable so that you can actually have that kind of connection and all of that. And I'm going like, okay, we've got a new Webster word. I mean, it might be a little harder to do Facebookable because that doesn't even sound right, but Instagrammable at least sounds a little catchy and all along those lines. But yeah, I was just catching that, and I was going like, yeah, I guess that's another case of social media and its influence. It's influencing so much that it is even influencing the way we talk and the words that we use as well. And I know one of the things that I get concerned about, even though I, like you, have developed a lot of friends around the world, but sometimes you wonder if we're doing enough interaction with those that are right in our own backyard and with our own family and friends, because we do get kind of caught up in society and in our own worlds and all of that. Because I know that my nephews, and by the way, I'm Mark, one of the producers for Pod TV and everything, but I know that my nephews are very much involved and immersed in their Oculus sets and all of that. And it reminds me of a quote that a socialist friend of mine had when the Walkman first came out, because he called that an example of bourgeois subjectivity, with everybody walking around with their Walkmans and kind of ignoring the rest of the world. So I guess that I am very much a fan of technology. We use it on Pod TV. I definitely love making all these new friends. I'm a big fan, even though I've not been on it as much as I was several months ago, of Clubhouse and all of that, which is a social media app where I've met a lot of folks, and LinkedIn, where I've met a lot of people. But now that we are getting more out and out about in society, I'm hoping that we'll actually be able to physically meet the folks that we have met in online and have the same interaction that we had in the person and everything. Of course, but we all know that it can be like the blind date or the date that you had back in the day, where you had all these great conversations, and yet I'm using this kind of analogy, but you had all those great conversations over the phone, and then maybe over the internet when the internet came out and all of that, and then you go and meet the person and you're like, oh, I really don't like you and all of that. So that is one of the things that could possibly happen even with your Nairobian friends, and even with some of the friends that I've met. Even though I'm learning their personalities, I think they're learning mine. So I think we'll be all right. But there is always that blind veneer that of not being actually able to respond to the person by actually seeing their reaction to whatever you are saying, and having that personal contact that you don't necessarily have on the internet, even when you're looking on cameras. For all I know, David could be throwing me the gang sign right now, but his hands are kind of hidden, so I don't know. And Fred could be muttering all kinds of bad things about me, and Donald could be like kicking the table, going like, "There's that Mark again. He's totally like being a nuisance and all of that. But see, all I see is the face. So I don't know. And all of these things could be happening. David, go ahead and admit it. You just do a gang sign at me and you don't want to admit it. Just go ahead and admit it.
Thank you. Thank you. This is really great discussions, and I'm sure this is a great learning for our audience. You know that World Talent Economy Forum, we are starting our operation in South Asia. We are engaging with university. We are engaging with different government agencies and corporations. We have two big conference. December in Dhaka University, we have conference. Next year, March, we have conference on Nikola Tesla technology. We try to involve with all of the corporations, largest universities, and government agencies in South Asia. So I want to invite you all. One thing I learned from Tando, they always say, think and do. So yes, World Talent Economy Forum, we love to do some project. We love to engage with different kind of activities. Specifically, you know that developing nations, it's difficult. It's really difficult. It's hard. How I am organizing this event, this is very difficult. I'm sweating, and some point we don't have electricity, we don't have enough internet. It's hard. But good point is that we have 200 million people. So when I come to Bangladesh, I have to think 100 times that what I'm doing is it right or wrong. But when I come to Bangladesh, I get a lot of support, especially from the youth. I want to give them thanks. Those who are our audience, they actually help us. They actually developing our lab, developing our training institutions, and they invite us. So I want to invite you all of the speakers. Uh, yes, you can get some real experience for socializations, for networking, for human relationship, and most important thing is that always I believe that doing work for own country is a great thing. My father was a freedom fighter, so I love to contribute for my countries, and I want to invite all of my World Talent Economy Forum fellow and friends because it's actually national progressions. It's bigger than business. It's bigger than developing a corporations. You are uplifting. You can uplifting like millions of people. So they need your support, your knowledge, your expertise, maybe your technology, your science and engineering, research. So I want to request all of the developed nations people, please support our projects, engage with us, join, engage with millions of people, change human life, and this way we can do a lot of real projects and it will be helpful for human progressions. So that is our objective. We are taking a lot of projects, a lot of initiatives. It's difficult, it's hard, but it's not impossible. So thank you, Professor Fred Philip, Professor David Smith, Professor Donalds, Mr. Markley, for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. Thank you, bye-bye, and take care.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Hi, y'all.